Hello. My go live's been a little slow the last few weeks. So we can tell it's getting close to campaign ending season. It feels a little different now. I certainly, for these, it's getting early. So I didn't have time to get my tea this morning because I rolled out of bed a little bit later, as happens um, when you are having a busy week. So this is a very busy week. Thank you for joining. We had two debates, one of which I was the only person that showed up to. I also filmed 207, and then I had personal stuff. I had a trial and a bunch of work stuff I had to do. So it has been a busy, busy, busy week. Next week's a busy week too. I'm going to be at the Bangor Rotary breakfast, or pardon me, the town hall they're normally Tuesdays. I don't know if I'm gonna move it later or not do it next week or do it a different day. I am gonna be filming up in Presque Isle. That was supposed to be another debate that isn't, but I did just get another debate invitation that they're trying to get going because the news is a little frustrated that I'm the only person that will show up to stuff. So they're trying to see if they can get one more debate to happen. That would be great. I love the debates. And we had a lot pop up in the debates. So folks are starting to join the format of these. These are very, so folks are starting to join the format of these. These are very casual on Saturday mornings. This is how I really look on a Saturday morning, whether or not I'm being filmed. So I try to give you me, how you'll get me. I don't do anything fancy or dress up for most of my stuff. I did dress up a little bit for the debates. I even put on makeup for you, but I am breaking out from it. So I have very sensitive skin. I haven't worn makeup regularly and since my 20s. So yeah, that was it was nice, I guess, to be made up, but I do not like the consequences of it. Yeah, you get me how I am pretty much every day, and I think that's important. I think that though there are certain settings, so for example, when I go to court, I have to dress up. Most settings, I think that you should just keep people who they are. And I'm sort of authentically a fairly casual, comfortable person. That's who I am most of the time. Some people aren't. I mean, when I was younger, I used to really like suits. That sort of was authentically me. Now I just don't have kids and too much to do. So I'm much more casual now. I'm much more of a penny sale rack girl than a suit gal. So the format of these for you, those of you who haven't joined before, is I usually start with kind of a recap of where we are. On Tuesdays, I try to have it be a little bit more focused, although this last Tuesday was a town hall that I put on right after the debates. So I just answered whatever questions came up. So I usually try to have something to talk about. I was just going to talk about sort of the debates generally this week. And then as you have questions, comments, concerns, just like a town hall, throw them in the chat and I will answer them as soon as I can. Sometimes I'll stop where I am immediately and answer. Sometimes I'll try and weave it into what I'm talking about. So that is the format that we use. It's very much like being at a town hall in person where there'll either be a microphone or pass up note cards. This is sort of the note card version. So this week we had the debates. Monday was Maine Public, and I was the only person who showed up. It's funny the things I get grilled on. I don't get grilled on policy as much as I might like. And there seems to be this sort of consensus that I'm qualified. Qualified is not the problem. The problem is electable. And we've got to change that. So I think that really popped up on Tuesday. I got a lot of messages after the debate, some very sweet emails. Got messages on Twitter. I even got a few things in the mail. Oh my gosh, I had a lovely senior citizen from Bar Harbor call me up and apologize. She called me and apologized on behalf of men and thought that the debate just was lovely and she couldn't even imagine voting for the other gentleman. It was the sweetest call. And she was shocked she got through to me. I cannot always answer the phone right away. She just happened to catch me at a time where I didn't have to do a callback. And that was a delightful interaction. So if you watch the debate on Tuesday, and again, if you're watching, I'm filling this with information that I think will be helpful for viewers watching later. Throw your questions in. That is my priority. So, but if you watch the debate, I think it became really clear that not only is Jared Golden on sort of a warpath to prove how much of a Republican he is. You know, they both of them were like, drill, baby, drill. And that was just astonishing to me how much they're not concerned about climate change, particularly since Jared Golden has a child much younger than mine. You think that he'd want her to have a future. And then, you know, they were really sort of kissing on some racist rants of like, we need to secure our borders instead of talking about the underlying problems with our immigration system. You know, it's great to like stop the emergency situation and stop the bleed. That's not going to happen at the border. These geopolitical forces are way too intense, and we're at fault for some of them. Not only do we meddle in some countries' affairs in negative ways, how we shouldn't, um, we also are in charge of policy that makes people be separated from their loved ones. And if you had family in the US, you would want to join them. And from some countries, that wait is like 30 years. That's not okay. That's not reasonable policy. It's racist policy. If we have people that are wanting to come here to be reunited with family, to connect up, they should have a reasonable path that isn't sneaking over the border, risking their lives in the middle of the night. And really, that's a lot of what goes to the border, or goes across the border, not at checkpoints. Um, you know, if people can get documents, they use the checkpoints. And a lot of the drugs that do come over the border where it's not maintained, they very much come through the checkpoints too, and they come through everywhere. I mean, drugs are a totally different problem, but if we pulled the pressure off and had a reasonable immigration system, you get rid of most of the human trafficking right away. You get rid of most of the incentive to close or to cross that border, to go through what it often ends up in death for an awful lot of these people. These people are, take away what makes that desperation there, take away the unreasonable process, and you'll have people who come here legally, participate in our society. You heard Bruce Poliquin didn't make this argument. Oddly, it was Jared Golden. There was a very protectionist rant about labor wages and folks who come here will work for less. But that, I mean, that's been true our whole country. That's not a new thing. Um, and right now, we don't have enough people in many of those skilled labor jobs to do it. This isn't a case of pulling people over from other tech industries, from Microsoft, and depressing wages of jobs that are, you know, $70,000 to $150,000 a year. These are jobs we don't have people to do right now. Most of the time, the construction industry, I was brought up, if that not at the, if it wasn't brought up at the debate, it was brought up not that far in the past. But you know, I'm in the process of building a house, and we're going to do most of the work ourselves. But we can't find contractors. There are not enough available. We have housing issues. We have affordable housing issues. Construction is and I say this again as somebody who's remodeled several homes and plans to personally do most of the work at my own house. Construction is back-breaking work. It's hard to do as a full-time job. You cannot do it your whole life for most people. It's just not reasonable. It grinds through your body. People who do it know that. I mean, it gets you in really good shape, but you usually can't do well past 40 or 50. And we don't have enough people who are young that are interested in doing that job. So same thing with caretaking. I definitely want caretakers to be paid well, whether they're helping students in class, you know, students that are on IEPs and extra support, or they're helping our senior citizens, or they're helping people who are disabled and need extra help. I definitely want those folks to be paid a wage that is a living wage, but we don't have the budget to pay them grand wages at all. And it's frustrating. It's frustrating to watch because there are places where we just need labor that isn't available at all, or available at the wages that make sense. And there is an interplay there. There's an interplay between labor wages and labor availability. But the jobs that folks who are willing to come here for a chance at a life that we have, they are willing to do they're kind of willing to take those crummy jobs for a few years as their buy-in to society. And I don't know that that's an unreasonable trade-off. So it is frustrating to me to hear both of the men talk about, oh, I funded this much wall. Oh, well, I funded $100 million or whatever it was for the wall. They're fighting over who paid more money for a wall that's bad for the planet. Those walls cut wildlife habitat off. They fall over because they're putting them in places that are not appropriate for walls, because Mother Nature doesn't really care about your wall, as we've seen with hurricanes this week. Ian doesn't care about your wall or your house or your street or your bridge or your causeway. They'll just take it over. So it is frustrating for me to watch us spend tens, if hundreds of millions of dollars on projects that could be supporting our social services, on projects that could be helping us have a more sustainable future, to keep out people that we could easily change the paperwork on, and we need anyway. I mean, our birth rate is really down in this country. We don't have a lot of young people to do the jobs that folks don't want to do unless they really don't have other options. I did a lot of those jobs when I was younger. So that was a very frustrating piece of the debate for me. I don't think that's gotten quite as much attention as other pieces. And we'll loop back to that. But yeah, it's frustrating. So Chuck asked, what's my stance on expanding the number of Supreme Court justices? I am not running for the Senate, so I will not have a lot of say on that, I suspect. But I don't like our Senate or our Supreme Court right now. It is out of balance. And unlike some folks who are very, very partisan, who are like, well, I want it to be a conservative and I want it to be a liberal, I really like a balanced court. So I want some conservative voices on there because they're going to be critical of some of the liberal ideology and help figure out where the pain points are. And there are pain points in liberal ideology. There are some things where you rush in without thinking about it. There are some times when you think you're protecting people, but you're harming others and don't notice it. I also want very liberal justices on the Supreme Court, because if people are talking about financial prudence and tightening their belt and doing things on a reasonable, well thought out pathway, you often violate a lot of human rights with that, and you don't get the answers. And I like some people in there that are not necessarily moderate, but different perspectives. So I'd want it about a third conservative, about a third liberal, about a third kind of wild card's probably not the right word, but I'm going to use it today. So I like people that maybe are a mix. Like, I'm a hodgepodge. I'm not a conservative. I'm not a liberal. I think a lot of the things I say can sometimes sound conservative. When you hear me talking about finances, I sound very conservative. I think when you hear me talking about human rights, I sound very liberal. I think when you hear me talking about budgets, I sound very libertarian. I think when you hear me talking about the planet, I sound very green. And I think a lot of us are like that. We don't necessarily fit completely into one ideology. So I don't know if expanding it is the right answer. It might be. That might be the only way to bring balance to it. I think we have some people on there that have some very sketchy backgrounds, and that makes me incredibly uncomfortable. As a lawyer, like, the Supreme Court is like our big deal. And I mean, it's our big deal for all of us, really, but for lawyers particularly. I've never, obviously, during my life, a lot of the folks have been on there have been very partisan. RBG was not even subtle that she was very liberal, and Scalia was not subtle at all that he was conservative. And watching them interplay was actually one of the things I love the most. When you see those varying points kind of spar and bring out the strengths and weaknesses and arguments. And that's why I'm a lawyer, because I like those strengths and weaknesses thing. But I'm sad that we don't have that now. And I think it makes for just horrible law and horrible precedent. So is expansion the answer? It might be. I don't know. We need to fix it. It is definitely out of balance. I also won't be in a space where I can do much about it. And I think that we need to have something we put into place, and I don't know what the mechanism will be. I haven't thought about it that much because I'm not running for a role that could do anything about it. So I try to use my energy efficiently. I only have so many things I can mull in any given day. But we need to put some sort of mechanism in there to correct it. It's kind of like an auto-correcting mechanism if it gets out of whack. And I don't know what that is. I hope people are more brilliant and think about this stuff more than me come up with it. Or if I'm ever in a role where I have some some influence over that, I certainly will put a little bit more thought into that. But I don't like how easy it was to get out of whack, and I don't like um, how slimy it felt getting there. It felt like the American people was being betrayed. Not just like, hey, we're winning at all costs, neener neener. It felt like there's actual harm being done to people and to our justice system, and that made me just so uncomfortable. I'm very uncomfortable with it, even though I'm in a somewhat protected position, I guess. I mean, as a woman, maybe I'm not a real person because our Constitution was founded thinking women weren't real people, and that's a bother. And there are certainly people that, there are people in fairly high positions of power that regularly talk about repealing the 19th Amendment. And for those of you that don't know what every single amendment is, and I don't know that I would be able to list every single one off by what it is, but the 19th Amendment is women's right to vote. So that is frustrating. A trick to remembering some of them. The 18th was prohibition, and the 21st, so at 21 you can start drinking, 18 you can't. So the 21st is repealing prohibition, in case you ever, find yourself on St. Patrick's Day needing some bar jokes. Yeah, I hope that answers your question, Chuck. I don't know that it's a very fulfilling answer. I don't like the way the court is right now, but I also am not running for a role where I can do anything about it. It is somewhat maddening to me, and really frustrates me a lot. So I'll loop back. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them in the chat. That's kind of how, if you're new to this format, that's kind of what happens, is I just sort of stop where I am. Sometimes I weave it into talking about, but Chuck's question didn't easily dovetail in. And I usually stay here for about 20 to 30 minutes minimum, but I've stayed for over an hour. Depends on how many questions that you have. I try to make sure I have all the time available. So Max asks, heating oil prices are soaring. What could you do in Congress to help? Heating oil is a hard thing, and it's kind of like inflation in a lot of ways. Heating oil is mostly, the prices that are mostly controlled by forces, excuse me, outside of our control. And I think the best thing we can do long term is work on getting us off of fossil fuels to something like electricity, where there are more mechanisms to provide electricity. So electric isn't the bestest thing that ever happened to heating. But once something is electrified, you have choices. And I say this as somebody who actually really likes my steam heater, and that is natural gas fired. But I love the steam heater, right? You can put your towels and your bra on it in the morning, and then you get out of the shower when they're nice and warm. It's lovely. I'm going to miss it when I don't have steam heat. So, but once you electrify something, what you've done is you've removed the dependence on a single source of fuel. You can, there some places use coal, which isn't great for the planet. Nuclear, water, or hydro. Just hydro. It could also be wave energy too. So there's dams and wave energy. Offshore wind, onshore wind, the solar, that you really open up how you can warm your house. But that doesn't fix our short-term solution, and really, or short-term, all we can do is throw money at it. They talk about opening up the reserves, but that's just a drop in the bucket. I mean, it's just not the solution. And the biggest problem with oil isn't really determined by the United States. We have taxes, which are a good chunk of our per gallon cost. But it's really determined by people who aren't U.S. citizens. It's, we determine it in as much as we determine sort of how collectively as individuals we use aggregated. But the reasons the gas is high right now, in fact, including heating oil, is there's a war going on in Russia, and Russia is a huge source of oil. We've got some sanctions against them, some embargoes. And most of the oil is produced in countries that sort of set the price. And even if we were to produce every drop of our oil at home, that still influences the price of oil generally. So there are some laws you could pass related to profiteering. The problem is we don't have the members of Congress that are willing to do it, because they're all on the hook to the fossil fuel lobby. And honestly, there is a lot of profiteering that occurs when we have a market. So market forces are powerful things, but when you have monopolies and oligarchies, and the oil industry kind of falls into the oligarchy, you don't trundle down to the neighborhood small business for a cup of their locally produced oil. That's not how fossil fuels work. And so there isn't a lot of competition. They're not supposed to go into cahoots, but they totally do. And I think that the answer to get long term is definitely to get off fossil fuels. And short term, I think we have to throw money at the problem. I hope that a lot of the money we throw at the problem, we've got LIHEAP funds, which is grants for states, particularly states where the weather is colder, where people can apply for funds for heating oil or keep themselves warm. The problem is those funds aren't really tied to inflation well, and the income necessary to get it. Those guidelines haven't changed much, but inflation has really kicked in the last couple of years. So a lot of people who need this are not eligible, and that is just incredibly problematic. We 100% are going to have people in Maine that choose between food and heat this winter, and it's awful. So I think money is the way to fix it. I think you can put in some laws about profiteering, but I don't think there's the political will. And that's what I butt up against a lot. People ask me, well, what would you do? Well, what would I do if I had a magic wand and I didn't have to worry about the opinions of other people in Congress and could do whatever laws I wanted? And I was the grand poobah. Well, that's very different than what's available with political will. I think on the other side of the spectrum, I've had people tell me that I'm a bit naive because I think I get some stuff done. I don't think that I'm amazingly convincing or that I have some magic reunifying power. I think that people that like to brag about their accomplishments and tell you all how awesome they are, because that's what most of Congress does to stay elected. I think it's very easy to give them carrots so that they look like they're being super successful and have something to brag about. So I don't think it's necessarily easy to get people to agree, but I think it's very easy to get people who like to show off. I think it's very easy to give them a shiny thing to show off with, and they are prone to that. So I think that's the motivation for a lot of people in Congress, not necessarily doing a good job. Just sad. So oil prices, I think that, I was actually looking at campaign reporting numbers. We're getting about 8 million. Maine is getting about 8 million from LIHEAP funds this winter. And if you add up the amount of money that Bruce Poliquin and Jared Golden together will have earned by the end of the campaign cycle, it's probably going to be right around $8 million. So I think it's very funny that the two of them together, if they decide to stop being jackasses and subjecting us to these horrible commercials, could collaborate and personally solve this problem for Maine. They won't. It's just a real shame. So I hope that answered your question, Max. The answer is we got to throw some money at it, but what we really need to do is get off fossil fuels. So if one industry gets inappropriate and protectionist and profiteering, then we can be like, hey, you know what? We're not going to supply oil for this. We're going to change the supply over, and maybe we'll grab some nuclear from another state, or maybe we'll put in some offshore wind farms, which can be done. Offshore wind farms can be managed pretty well with sustainability, and it doesn't. I think a lot of fishermen are perhaps short-term hesitant, but I don't see it as really interfering with that. My husband works in offshore wind. He also used to be a fisherman. So I think that there's ways to mitigate that. When people are concerned about ugly windmills, you're not necessarily going to see those. So just a thought. How do we handle the AstroTurf national attack on school board members, teachers, LGBTQ, I'm not caffeinated, students that we're currently seeing in Maine as well? We have to elect people who are willing to stick their neck out. I take a lot of heat for it. I get called a pedophile online all the time by these people who are just nuts. And I don't think it's nuts to want to protect your children from influences that you feel unsafe with. I think it's nuts to let yourself get manipulated into thinking that that's happening as a regular course of practice in schools. I think that we should be having leaders, whether it's local leaders, at the school board level, all the way up on federal leaders. I don't think I've heard Jared Golden say a word about it. Bruce Poliquin would probably indulge it. So if it seems like I hit on Jared Golden sometimes a lot, I think that he wants to tell everybody he's an independent, but he's not really an independent. And he has the resources of somebody who's not an independent. He doesn't want to fight like he's an independent, where he's, so he sells people on this dog and pony show of something that he has no plans to deliver, either because he authentically doesn't believe it, which I kind of don't believe, or because he thinks it will help him get elected. And he thinks by throwing some votes, it helps him stay in office. I don't have higher expectations of Bruce Poliquin. I just know what to expect of him. And to some extent, I almost prefer that, because I don't end up relying on somebody to protect me that won't. So Bruce Poliquin, he's never going to stick his neck out for teachers. He's not interested in doing anything that doesn't indulge some of the conspiracies and fantasies that have taken hold on the right. There's conspiracies and fantasies on the left too, but he is perfectly happy to go down that rabbit hole with you, which is a shame. But I mean, we should be standing up for that. That's not what happens in school. I think that some conspiracies and these are not new conspiracies, they're just have new and exciting life breathed into them. There's a lot of fantasies that if you're exposed to GLBT lifestyles, you will like magically become GLBT. And it's not true. I mean, to some extent, we're kind of pre-programmed from birth and socialized a little bit to what we find attractive. There was nothing that made me find my husband specifically attractive that was in my childhood or that I was reared to believe. And I tried to date a bunch of different demographics to see what was the right fit. But, at the end of the day, I definitely have a type. My husband is it. I like tall men who appear Nordic, and that is just something I've always liked from the second I hit puberty. So that's certainly not everything that I dated, but a lot of that's pre-programmed, so you don't get the gaze by having somebody rub their cooties off on you. It's not something you learn. It's definitely not a learned behavior. It's something that's just who you are. It's a fundamental thing. And it's not something we can control. I think there's a lot of people that fear that their children may fall into that peril if they're exposed to it. And it's objectively not true. There's no data that suggests in any way that's how you end up being attracted to a different sort of person. So, but we don't have people that are willing to say that. We don't have people that are willing to step up. I mean, I've gotten into it with some folks that were pushing those conspiracy theories online. It's not true. And I think when people are silent or don't acknowledge it, they allow it to fester, and that's not okay. I mean, even at the debate on Tuesday, we were asked about marriage. Why are we talking about interracial marriage again? But it's coming up because there are people that want it changed. And that's, I mean, aside from being logistically just freaking impossible and ridiculous, I mean, we have so many people in this country that are interracial. Who would they be allowed to marry? That's insane. But it's just not something the government should be regulating like that. So it's, the response from Bruce Poliquin was like, I love everybody, but that's already law. Well, it's not. It's state law. It's a law. That was created by a Supreme Court decision. It can be uncreated by a Supreme Court decision. They can kick it back and kind of go, oh goodness, well, the lawmakers didn't actually get to that, which seems to be the dog and pony that the Supreme Court is using is, well, that wasn't decided by state courts and it wasn't made a law by legislators. So that's not a law. And, our Supreme Court has created a lot of laws like that when they find constitutional violations of laws. So, without that, people are at risk. So Jared Golden gave the most muted response I can imagine. I mean, he just emotionally wasn't even there. And my answer is it's not appropriate to let people wonder about their uncertain future. That creates a phenomenal amount of stress. It creates a phenomenal amount of stress if you don't know if you're going to be harmed for your relationship, or your relationship is going to be declared invalid, or your life is going to be declared invalid. That is not appropriate. That is legislative neglect that causes legitimate and genuine harm. And it doesn't just apply to LGBTQ issues. It also applies to our social support network. When people don't know if they're going to have enough food to eat, or if they don't know if they're going to be able to have housing, or it's unclear whether or not they'll have the income they need to survive long term or be able to go to school. And we're seeing that with student loans right now, where people don't know how much they'll have in their student loans that they're actually responsible for. So, the Biden administration said that they were going to forgive $10,000 to $20,000 of student loans. They've really walked that back and clawed back a lot of loan types that we're going to forgive, and people don't recognize that's happening, and they're going to be very unhappy and very uncertain when they put those two together. So, one of the most damaging things that legislative neglect does is it gives uncertainty. The second is probably that it takes away hope. That's what's happening in our immigration system. Not only is there some uncertainty, but there's definitely a lack of hope that you'll get any help. And those things, even if you're not, stabbing somebody literally, those are very damaging to people. It is very damaging to not know if your world is going to be supported by society. So somebody said, I don't think it's an issue worth wasting time on. Gay marriage and interracial marriage is not going away. I sort of agree that we have it here now, and it's very difficult to undo. I want to agree with you that I don't like double legislating. However, because it was done with a Supreme Court precedent, I find it very uncomfortable. If this had been done in the time before Roe, where we were told that no matter what, Roe was there, it was precedent, it was never going away, we didn't have to codify it, we didn't have to fix it, we didn't have to change it, it was there. If Roe hadn't just fallen, I might agree with you. But even if gay marriage is not going away, giving people the certainty of saying, look, this is a federal right at this point in time. You are protected in light of what's happened with Roe, which did fall. That was precedent that fell, and it is harming tens of thousands, if not millions of women, literally, physically, right now. I think that it is appropriate and prudent to waste time on it. And I know that we might disagree on that, but I want a government that doesn't stress me out for no good reason, right? Like we have a government right now that uses harm to get us to donate to candidates. I mean, our government is based on fear and not having enough, not what it should be. Our government should be based on let me show that comment. The YouTube didn't think that I should show you, but I'm going to show you because I think that we should all talk. We should have a government that is based on sending people who really care about us to go problem solve. And not all of them need to be attorneys, but we should have some attorneys. We should probably have some family law attorneys. To the best of my knowledge, I don't think we have any family law attorneys in DC. And I think that would make a huge difference because family law attorneys work with the federal law that impacts us most. I think we do have some lawyers down there, but they might be like prosecutors or litigators, and they don't work with the federal bits that really get to us. But we should have a government that goes and problem solves and tries to fix things. And instead, we have a government that fundraises and tries to stay in office. And that's not okay. I mean, we have very deeply, thoroughly, and entirely corrupted our government. And it is a miracle that it is still standing because we've just got tribal team sports screaming at each other to fundraise to stay elected. And that's just, it's mind-boggling that that's what our government is. And I don't think it's necessarily apparent, although it's becoming hard to not notice. I don't think it's super apparent until you run for office. When I debate Bruce Poliquin and Jared Golden, when I first did in 2018, I assumed, because I hadn't met them yet, that both Bruce and Jared were sort of brilliant, and maybe a lot of their presentation was an act to to appeal to a voter group, and that we had a bunch of very, savvy people down in DC that really were very thoughtful, and that the show that was put on for the very reality TV show, game show interview we have was unrelated to what was happening down there. And I think that I don't know, that's maybe someplace I was a little naive in. I wanted to have faith in this wonderful country that I had faith in, even though we've had a storied and not necessarily pleasant history, and things don't always go right. We always seem to end up kind of on top. And so I assumed that we were taking better care of our laws. I learned in law school that we definitely were not taking very good care of our laws. And I already knew that a lot of folks were hard to get a hold of, and maybe I just assumed they were busy, not that they just didn't give a fiddlehead. They do not give a fiddlehead. I mean, debating Bruce and Jared on stage, I know why Bruce is there. It's definitely not for us. I don't know why Jared's there, and that makes me actually a little bit more concerned. But I can't say definitively that either one of them really deeply, truly cares that we have a functional government. And that is horrifying, because I suspect that's in every single race, that, the likely candidate is not someone who cares if we have a functional government. And that's astonishing. That's an astonishing fact. So, yeah, I guess the one place where I really stand out is if you watch the debates, like, why am I the underdog? Just because I don't have money? That it? Is that what our government is now? Is if people buy your vote, you're going to be the one who wins? That's not the country we've been sold on. We've been sold on a country that if you work hard and you care and you're determined, that you can be successful. And that's not how our country's governed or put together. So we're going to have to disagree on whether or not it's worth wasting time on gay marriage and interracial marriage, because when you have a huge chunk of your population that either feels that it's appropriate to wind back those rules, and or is in the position of being afraid that those rules are going to be wound back, and you have law that was made by a court case instead of by the law being drafted, you are in a space of risk. And I think that if the court case happens and changes the law, it is probably a very prudent and wise choice to go through and change all the law to match the court case and the constitutional precedent that was created, because otherwise you are at risk. So, and I don't like the way that we learned that lesson, but we certainly had a very good lesson in it lately. So, feel free to drop other questions in there. If we've had a few more people come in, we're just talking about the debates and this week. Other highlights from the debate, we talked about the men really wanted, boy, neither of the men is committed to the environment. I wasn't really asked an environment question. I was asked sort of a question about the Inflation Reduction Act bill generally. And so I sort of answered the thing that had come up the most, which is that it was sort of it sounded good. I haven't read it yet. I've literally been walking around with it in my bag. I just haven't had a minute to do anything lately because it's been a crazy few weeks. The marketing piece sounds good. They're hiring IRS agents, which I think is a really wise choice. And I'd really like to see us shifting enforcement of fraud to the IRS is sort of their core competency. They're good at that. And right now we have a lot of agencies doing it that are bad at it. And I think it would let them deliver on their missions a little bit better and be much less wasteful of resources and catch more fraud, to have it shifted to the IRS. And then, as they moved down the road, they talked about the environment. And I thought we would have another environmental question, and we didn't. So I was, I guess I'm glad that at least this year it was brought up somehow. I'm sort of sad that I was semi-excluded. I could have made that question about the environment, but I thought we were going to have a question about the environment explicitly, since some of the other things we talked about more explicitly. Other big differences, boy, do we have differences on abortion. Bruce Poliquin's non-answer was, I'm super pro-life, but the people in the state should decide. Well, that's not true. He's voted for federal laws when he was in office to ban it. So he is full of it. That's an absolutely untrue statement. Jared Golden saying, well, I think people have a right to choose, but once you hit viability, no. Well, the problem with that, and this is why it just shouldn't be legislated. Most of our medical procedures are not legislated. They're determined to be, safe or unsafe and kind of approved by medical boards. And that's the extent of it. We don't look at how people treat cancer or, prostate care. That's not federally legislated. It's just standard of care with doctors. So the reason why it shouldn't ever be legislated is it pushes those decisions to insurance agencies, to lawyers, to people who push paperwork, not medical professionals. And when people talk about things like, late term abortion, those are medical terminations. And we've seen with Roe falling across the country, not only places that have no early abortions, so 10-year-old rape victims being forced to either travel or carry a baby to term. A 10-year-old's body can't handle that. A 10-year-old could very easily die. And what the hell are we having a 10-year-old face the consequences of some creepy adult man? Like, what? Why are we destroying a child's life? That child's life is no less important. So, that's inappropriate. But when you're talking about the older or later in pregnancy terminations, those are all medical, all of them. No one gets to 6, 7, 8 months pregnant and says, this pregnancy thing, it's a bother. I'm just going to stop now. No one does that. It is very harmful to your own body to do it. And I think that as voters, we should push back and say, you're not going to try to get me to hate my neighbor and judge my neighbor for their behavior that I don't know everything about and is none of my damn business, so that you can fundraise off me. I mean, this has become an issue where they've convinced us that we need to be judgy McJudgersons and that we need to pretend we know everything about people's lives. We don't know what's going on in their household. We don't know if that person has cancer. We don't know if that person is a rape victim. We don't know if that person and if there's domestic abuse, and we don't know if they have $500,000 worth of debt and no way to pay for another child. We don't know. We don't know if they had a birth control failure, and it's none of our business. But for some reason, the reason's money. And the reason for politicians to jump on this is money and hate. I don't know why we've let ourselves get sold on it. And maybe it's because we feel better about ourselves if we judge other people. I don't know. But my day job is judging people's behavior, and I don't feel like I can judge those sort of situations because I just don't know what's going on. So, shame on politicians for trying to make us judge and hate our neighbors. It's awful. And shame on us for buying into it. Yeah, I mean, the amount of marketing effort that has gone into shining up medical tragedies so that we think that instead of women who are choosing to not die or choosing humane ends for babies that are not compatible with life, we are taking away end of life care decisions from parents. Some of these bills, I haven't read all of them, but some of the federal ones that I've read, they do things like require sort of extensive medical procedures on on children that are later in life that are absolutely known to be incompatible with life. And they're like, hey, we know the baby's probably going to die, like 99.99% chance. The baby has like anencephaly, which is like part or all of your brain missing. But, you have to do medical interventions when that baby comes, because a lot of abortions are actually like births. You have to do medical interventions. So we're going to take away the 3 to 30 minutes that those parents might have to say goodbye to their babies and force that child to get medical care when we know that child's going to die. It's one area that really gets me out. So we should not be in that at all. It's nobody's business, and we shouldn't be legislating that. So that was a major difference between me and the gentleman. Immigration's a major difference. Same-sex marriage is definitely a major difference between me and Bruce. Not as much of a difference between me and Jared, although he certainly is lacking a whole lot of passion and zest for that. They didn't even bother to show up Monday. We might have another one. I did have another thing that popped up, which I was sort of astonished by. So there has been some pretty awful coverage of this campaign in that there's still omissions, and it happened in 2018. I'd hoped that our media had gotten to a better place. I know, hope's a jerk. Um, so I will say Steve Collins from the Sun Journal is doing a better job of covering this race, and that's been really lovely. But when the debate didn't happen on Monday, the news sources, the press, I think it was Press Herald. I think it was the Press Herald. It was either Press Herald or BDN. They both had things that were maybe not appropriate. No, it was BDN. BDN was this one. So BDN, so Bangor Daily News for you not in Maine, ran, hey, there's a debate coming up. Here's what we can expect from Bruce Poliquin and Jared Golden on their positions from the 2018 debates. Well, not only had they just not shown up at a debate and they shouldn't have gotten rewarded by that, I was in the 2018 debates, so they should have included my position. It was literally an event that I was at. I was at all 3 debates. They only showed up to 2 debates in 2018. So that was just astonishingly bad coverage. When you see things like that, call the news, tell them that's unacceptable. And then the other thing that happened, and this one was at Press Herald, I think, after the debate, there was an article that talked about how the debate went. I wasn't mentioned to like the 11th paragraph. It was just shocking. It was as if I wasn't there, and I was delivering answers to questions that were directly responsive and not scripted. Bruce was delivering just memorized lines of nonsense. Jared was reading out of a book and picking the right answer to match the question. And I was answering the questions, no notes, no anything. And it wasn't covered. That was just astonishing. And that's why we don't get good candidates, because they're covering the money. So don't allow that. When you see that, it's worth an email. It's worth a call. What the hell are you doing? Okay. Most of your takes seem to be spot on to me. Thank you for increasing awareness of these issues. Do you think we can reconcile the giant gulf between the established parties today? I think what we need to do is start withholding money. And the problem is we've gotten into these quasi-abusive relationships with the parties. So the Republican Party, bless their heart, if there's not money from people, they'll just get it from corporations. They have no ethical qualms with that. In fact, some of them, there's multiple competing ethical systems in this world, and some of them are mutually exclusive but still valid. So, there is an argument to be made that if the corporations are paying for it, you're actually helping people by not asking them to take money out of their grocery budget to pay for politics, and you're letting the corporations bear that. Of course, that comes with a hook. And of course, the corporations then expect you to be beholden to them. So I don't know that that's I think that the ethical system sounds good until you realize that that's the outcome of it. I apologize. My steam heat is coming on, so my eyes are a little watery from the change in temperature on Saturdays. We set it to come on a little bit later. So the Democrats have gotten into this really just icky space. I don't like it. Actually, while I was sitting at the debate, I pulled out my phone from the podium, and there was a text message begging me for money, sort of existentially, on my phone that had come in during the debate. And I pulled it out at one of the breaks, and I couldn't do anything but laugh about that. So what's happened is that Democrats have failed to legislate when they've had the power, because it is more profitable to do so. And they haven't listened to a lot of their constituents. This is the point in time, for those who know, our dog, as soon as he discovers that I am on camera and stuck in a place, it's his favorite time to come visit with me, because he knows that I am right here and not moving. You know what the camera means, don't you? This is Gunnar, our dog, for those of you who haven't met him. He is delicious, but like 90 pounds. Yeah, you're not a lap dog, buddy. I know, you're so sweet, but you're 90 pounds a dog. So unfortunately, we've got this really dysfunctional relationship where the Democrats say, hey, if you don't give us $5 or $10, if you don't chip in that small amount of money, the Republicans are going to be comic book villains, and they're going to take over, and they're going to destroy our lives. And there's just enough truth to that we keep giving money. I mean, I actually don't contribute to political campaigns, and I never have. I said that in 2018, and people didn't believe me, and they went and looked me up because they were just sure I'd contributed to political campaigns, and they were like, "You never have." I'm like, "No, I never have." So I think that because we've gotten into this relationship, if we don't change the dynamic, it's going to continue to escalate. I mean, we've all seen it. Anybody who has ever accidentally got on any mailing list, I have never signed up for a campaign, and I get so many text messages. I'm getting upwards of a dozen a day for campaigns all over the country that I clearly have never had anything to do with. So unless we start changing how they can get money out of us or get money out of the system entirely, I don't think that we're going to be able to get through that gulf, because the problem is the best fundraising, hi buddy, is on pain, and pain comes from not accomplishing legislation. I mean, I appreciate that the Democrats are now currently taking seriously that they might have to write into law same-sex marriage and interracial marriage. But the reason why they're realizing that that's a problem is because women are not people right now. The reason why they're realizing that's a problem is women said for decades, you have got to put these laws, you've got to make laws around this. You've got to legislate this. You've got to protect us. We don't have to worry about that. That's not a problem. And so they fundraised off the threat that it could be a problem without fixing the problem. And that's what's happening with a lot of legislation right now. So, unfortunately, it is profitable for both the Republicans and the Democrats to do nothing. And that's why we have no change on immigration. That's why we have no change on a wide range of issues. The spite and the contention is excellent for fundraising. Fear is excellent for fundraising. And so until we find a way to turn the tap off for money, I don't think that you're going to have them coming together. I mean, they're only going to come together when the forces that get them elected demand it. And that is super unfortunate, because what that means is we've had decades for people to get into office that are these kinds of people, and they're kind of icky and they're horrible legislators. But we have this super important job. And I can tell you, somebody who's just running, like, I am a regular, competent, qualified person. I have 4 degrees. I've served in a myriad of civic capacities. I was a city official for almost 8 years. I've been on boards of directors of different nonprofits. I've been involved in chambers of commerce and industry groups. So like, I've been involved in the American Bar Association. I've been involved in the American Marketing Association, and did that in 2 different states. So I've been involved in not-for-profits that worked, one not-for-profit that worked on putting playgrounds in areas where children are economically disadvantaged. I mean, a wide range. I've been all over the board in sort of civic involvement. I've traveled a lot. Like, I have a pretty qualified history, and I struggle to get coverage. The only way I could get more coverage is if I raised millions of dollars, which I find puts me in a very ethically precarious place. Or I guess if I like wandered around naked, or got like a giant inflatable lobster I took with me. I mean, I would have to do something ridiculous. Being qualified, being good, caring, kind, and qualified is not enough to get elected in almost every circumstance. And that's why I'm running, is it should be enough. We don't have candidates to vote for that are good, kind, caring, and competent most of the time. We might have candidates that are crafted or postured to be that, but very seldom have they turned out to be. So if we don't start electing people, and we've got to figure out a way to do this together without all the gross, if we don't start electing people, we will never have people in office that will make the changes. So we're caught in this vicious cycle, and that is really frustrating for me. And that's honestly why I ran again. 2018 was an interesting experience, but boy, it's a lot of time to run for office. I mean, just getting on the ballot is for this year was well over 430 hours worth of work. And then I work my full day job, and I have to work my day job. I can't be like, oh, I'm just going to stop working. Who can do that? Who can afford to take a year off work? I still have my kids. I still have my husband. I still have my dog. He really loves attention. He's a big hugger. Are you a hugger? Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I've got my dog who's into the hugs. I have all of those things in my life, and those are normal things to have. Most people have a job. Most people have families of some sort. Even if you don't have your own children, you have extended family usually, and that takes a lot of time. And we don't have a process that allows for people to just say, hey, I do this job. I can afford to live in this budget. I think that I'd be good at it. Give me a shot. He is a lot today. I apologize. He's very, very, very loving today. Are you very, very, very loving today? Yeah. This is his thing. He does the lean around the neck. So I do think that there is a way, but it's a very narrow, scraggly path to get the gulf between the parties. And I think the way you do it is you start getting a few people in office who say, we don't have to do this anymore. I mean, not to be too, 80s big hairband, but like, we're not going to take it. We're not going to take this stuff. We're not going to tolerate it. We're not going to keep funding your shit. We're not going to indulge this hateful rhetoric. We're not going to reward bad commercials. We're not going to reward, awful marketing. We want you to tell us what you're going to do for us. We want you to show us who you are as a person, not what you've focused grouped into thinking needs to exist. We're not doing that anymore. And I think that's the only way that you can fight back on this, is to say, we're going to elect people that aren't doing this. We're going to give resources to people that aren't doing this. The problem is finding people who aren't doing it. Because I can tell you, as somebody who's doing that, or who's running without that whole Santa's bag of toys bundle of garbage, it is hard to be that candidate. It is hard to be in a space where you are sort of objectively the best person for the job. Again, not that I'm a wizard, it's that the standard is super low here. And not get taken seriously. There was political commentary after the debate, and it was three gentlemen talking about the two gentlemen on the stage, and they said, oh yeah, Tiffany was there and she's competent, but I don't really know why she's running. And then they proceeded to talk about the men almost the entire time. They spent more time on Jared Golden wearing a flannel shirt than they did on me giving policy answers. I mean, we just have to say we're not going to take that anymore. Susan says that dogs are the best judge of people. My dog is very loving, aren't you? Yeah. You look very serious right now. So, I mean, I think... I think the way that we do it is we have to elect a few people. So pick some races, and this is a good one for it because it's ranked choice voting, because I legitimately do care. I legitimately want us to have good law, and I legitimately don't care about all of that crap. I don't care about the fundraising. I think that it makes very bad candidates. I don't care about the posturing and the theatrics. I do care about us having good law. I do care about us taking the job seriously. I do care about us making sure that the job is done well. I filmed on Wednesday for 207, and the gentleman host, oh, he's a lot. He's always a lot. I'm not sure why he does that job, because he doesn't seem to really want to hear what people have to say. I mean, he made two different suggestions to me that were just sort of appalling. One was that I needed to work my way up. I've been a city official. I've done the work. I've got the education. I know federal law. And then the other suggestion is, he said that I seem to care about people, so maybe I should go work in constituent services. And constituent services is a very important underpaid job, but it pays around $40, $45 a year. I would have to relocate for it, and it's entry level. I mean, he wanted to dismiss every single thing that I'd done and say, well, why don't you go be the political equivalent of a frontline customer service rep? And, I already worked at Kinko's and solved people's problems in a low wage sort of way. I went and got a whole bunch of education and a whole bunch of life experience. And I've worked a very grown up job for a very long time, so that I could solve people's problems with policy and change the laws instead of looking around and trying to find solutions in a system that's broken. So until we get people that really care about these jobs doing them, it's going to be very hard to heal that rift. The parties, because they are driven primarily by money, are only going to come along when they realize that they don't get the money, the resources, and the electable candidates if they don't make wise choices. And if you watch the debate, I'm sure you saw them both saying, I'm bipartisan. No, they're token bipartisan, and they're bipartisan in ways that aren't helpful and don't make law. Throwing your vote to, going ahead and throwing your vote on something so that you can say, well, I voted against my party and I'm bipartisan, or naming a highway with somebody in a different political party, that's not bipartisan, that's there. So we need non-theatrical candidates. Sorry. All right. I haven't had a whole bunch more questions. I've been talking for an hour. I love spending my mornings with you. I think that I've run through the questions. There is not going to be a town hall Tuesday 7 this upcoming week because I'm going to be driving to Presque Isle, and it is unsafe to drive and film, though many people do it. You should not. I will either cancel it or I will have it at an alternate time that I'll publish on Twitter. I should be around next Saturday. You can always find me on social media. If you're Bangor, I'm going to be at the Rotary on Tuesday in the afternoon before I drive all the way up to Presque Isle. So I will be around, and you should be able to find me places. I think that the Freiburg Fair is still going. It starts tomorrow, actually. And we might be heading out to Franklin County in just a little bit. I'm just waiting for confirmation. Today is a little bit of a gloomy day, and I have some work to catch up on with this last week. But if you need anything else, you can find me online, find me on town halls. I'll be at fairs. I'll also be at some other events coming up. I should have some Oktoberfest things that I'm at this year. Instead of doing my own specific events, people told me, I asked several hundred people, where would you want to see me for events? And the feedback I got resoundingly was, it's a pandemic. We've been trapped inside. We want to see you at events that we would go at anyway so that we don't waste a trip. So that is what I've chosen to do. It was great. Last weekend, it was a Common Ground Fair. I had a whole bunch of folks that I ran into that were probably going to the fair anyway, but were looking for me specifically. So that was lovely to be able to run into people. If you see me out and about, I keep a name tag on if I'm sort of in my campaigning capacity, even if I have children with me. If I don't have a name tag on, I may be a little bit more short with you. Please don't take it personally. It just means that I'm like buying groceries or trying to get gas or I have to pick my kids up. So the name tag is sort of the flag. If you see the name tag, that means that I'm available to talk. Otherwise, you can say hi. But if I seem like I'm short with you, it just means that, I might have to go pick my kids up or get my dog from somewhere, or I might be on a deadline. So the name tag is what to look for. And otherwise, I'll see you next Saturday, and I'll see you around this week. And let's hope that we have that second debate. If you're wanting to help the campaign, great ways to help domain raising. It's like doing a single door knock. If you need help on that, send me a message. I'll walk you through it. If you'd like to send postcards, we're switching up our messaging starting today on postcards. We're going to focus a little bit more on the date of voting before we were focused on issues. So send me a message. You can do 5 postcards, 10 postcards, 50 postcards, whatever's comfortable for you. We got about 540,000 voters to get to. So however many you want to take a whack at, I'm happy to help you with that. The way postcards work is you donate postcards, time to write them out in postage, and I give you a script and some names and addresses. So that's a great way to help. There's a Get Involved page if there's anything else. And if anybody wants to be a little bit of a Facebook warrior, not my favorite place. If you tag me in, I'll come answer questions, but talk to your friends and family, send them texts, talk in person. If you're not in Maine's 2nd Congressional District and you don't know people who are, do a Maine raising, tell people about Maine raising, all that helps. Almost all of that's free. So I hope you have a really lovely weekend, and the colors are starting to pop. There's some really nice orchards available. Get out there, spend a little time outside, have some fun, and let me know if there's anything else I can do for you all.